You know, when you think of a digital threat, what comes to mind? Probably some lone hacker in a dark room, right? Well, the reality today is so much more complex. The ghosts in our machines, they're more varied, they're way more sophisticated, and they're woven into the fabric of our lives. We're going to explore three of the biggest ones: the social engineer, the corporate surveillance engine, and the state-sponsored cyber warrior. And we'll start with the one that doesn't target our software, it targets our minds.
And that, right there, that's the absolute key to understanding this whole new landscape. Because while we've built these incredible digital fortresses to protect our data, the most effective attacks, they just bypass the walls entirely. They knock on the front door and exploit the one thing we can't patch: us.
So that leads us right into our first ghost in the machine, the art of deception. This kind of threat, it doesn't rely on brilliant code or fancy exploits. Nope, it relies on exploiting the bugs, the glitches in our own human psychology.
So who's saying this? Well, it's none other than Kevin Mitnick, a guy who was once the FBI's most wanted hacker. But here's the thing, his primary weapon wasn't some sophisticated program, it was the telephone. He just understood on a deep level that the weakest link in any security system is almost always the person operating it.
Okay, so check out this classic play right out of his book. Picture this, your work phone rings. It's tech support. They sound calm, professional. They tell you there's some critical issue with your account, but hey, don't worry, they're here to help you fix it right now. They guide you to what looks like a totally legitimate login screen, and then comes the masterstroke. The voice on the phone says, "Now, go ahead and type your password, but don't tell me what it is." And then they pause. "You should never tell anyone your password. On my screen, I'll just see asterisks." In that one moment, they've built massive trust. You feel safe. You feel like you're in control. Of course, the software they've had you open is a fake, and it's recording every single keystroke. They literally invented the crisis and then sold themselves as the only solution.
And this is the crucial difference, right? We spend billions of dollars on firewalls and encryption to stop people from hacking computers. But hacking people? That just exploits our built-in programming, our tendency to trust, to be helpful, to feel fear. And the only defense against that is awareness. And that, my friends, is a much, much harder problem to solve.
Okay, but what if this kind of psychological trickery wasn't just a one-off scam? What if it was built into the very fabric of the internet? Well, that brings us to our second ghost, the corporate surveillance engine. This is a threat that is vast, it's automated, and it is quietly shaping our lives every single day.
And no, that's not some kind of exaggeration. According to security expert Bruce Schneier, the sheer volume of data being collected about every single one of us is completely unprecedented. And the biggest collectors? They're not governments or spies. They're the corporations whose services we use every day, often for free.
This has created a whole new kind of economy, what Professor Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism. And it runs on this stuff called behavioral surplus. Think about it like this. When you use a map app, it needs your location to give you directions. That's the primary data. But what about all the other stuff it collects? Where you go, how fast you drive, where you stop, what stores you pass, that is the surplus. It's not actually needed to provide the service, but it's incredibly valuable for predicting what you're going to do next.
And the way this works, it's a chillingly effective process. The system starts by collecting all that data to predict our behavior. You've probably heard the famous story about Target predicting a teenager was pregnant just based on her purchases of lotion and supplements. They actually knew before her family did. But it doesn't stop there, at prediction. The whole point is to sell those predictions to advertisers, who then use them to actively intervene, to nudge us, to steer our behavior toward whatever outcome they want to buy.
And this is the really chilling endgame that Zuboff warns us about. The goal shifts from simply knowing what we're going to do to making sure we do it. The system isn't just a tool we use anymore, it's actively using us. We become the raw material for its real product, a guaranteed outcome.
So, if corporations are weaponizing our data for profit, what happens when a whole country does it for power? This is where we meet our third and maybe most dangerous ghost, the state actor. And in this realm, the internet isn't a marketplace anymore. It's a battlefield.
All right, I want you to imagine something. You're an engineer at Iran's super-secure Natanz nuclear facility. You're looking at the control panels, thousands of little lights on your screen, each one representing a complex centrifuge, and they are all glowing bright green. All systems normal, everything's okay.
Except it wasn't okay at all. As Mark Goodman describes in Future Crimes, there was a ghost living deep inside those machines. Behind that calm green glow, a digital phantom we now call Stuxnet was feeding the engineers a comforting lie while screaming destructive commands directly at the hardware. It was secretly, methodically, forcing thousands of those centrifuges to spin at self-destructive speeds, literally tearing themselves apart from the inside. This was a physical attack, causing real-world destruction, carried out by a weapon made entirely of code.
And the scary part? The escalation since Stuxnet has been unbelievably fast. As Andy Greenberg documented in his book Sandworm, in 2007 the entire country of Estonia was digitally paralyzed. By 2010, Stuxnet was causing physical destruction. Jump to 2015, and the Sandworm group literally turned off the power for 250,000 people in Ukraine. And by 2016, hacking was being used to directly interfere in a US presidential election.
Look, this isn't just random acts of chaos. This is a strategy. It's often linked to an idea called the Gerasimov Doctrine, which basically argues that modern war has changed. Forget troops and tanks. The primary weapons now are covert, digital attacks, and something called informational confrontation. Think propaganda, hacking, disinformation, all designed to destabilize a country from the inside out. The goal is to just blur the lines between war and peace until you can't even tell when the attack has begun.
Okay, so we've got the con artist, the corporate data machine, and the state-sponsored warrior. It's a lot. It sounds pretty bleak, right? But there is a fourth group out there. The defenders, the investigators, the people who are actually fighting back against these ghosts in the machine.
For the longest time, everyone just assumed this was the case. Darknet markets like the Silk Road, they thrived because they used cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, which were supposed to be totally anonymous and untraceable. But is that really true?
And then investigators like Tigran Gambarian came along. As detailed in the book Tracers in the Dark, he and others realized that Bitcoin's greatest strength, its public ledger, was also its greatest weakness. He started this incredibly painstaking process of following the money, not through bank records, but transaction by transaction on the public blockchain itself.
And this is exactly where that whole myth of total anonymity just completely falls apart. See, every single transaction is public, and it's permanent. Yeah, the addresses are pseudonyms, not real names, but investigators can trace the flow of those coins from one address to the next. And eventually, when the criminal tries to cash out through a crypto exchange, which almost always requires ID verification, boom, that pseudonym is suddenly linked to a real person. The digital breadcrumbs lead right to their front door.
So, catching the bad guys after the fact is one thing, but how do we stop them from getting in the first place? Well, the experts who built Google's secure systems argued that security can't be an afterthought. You can't just bolt it on at the end. That's retrofitting, and it's always messy and less effective. The real solution is designing for resilience from day one, building systems that just assume an adversary is already inside and can recover automatically when things go wrong.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This isn't a fight that's going to have some clean, neat ending. As Mark Goodman puts it, we are in a perpetual arms race. As our defenses get better, so do the attacks. Every time technology creates a new opportunity for good, it also opens up a new door for harm.
And that leaves us with one last big question. We've seen how attackers target our psychology, how corporations try to automate our behavior, and how nations are now waging war online. In a world this interconnected, where every single device is a potential doorway, the front line isn't somewhere out there anymore. It begins right here, with us.